closer look at the inheritance tax. I'm Jill Horner. This is Comcast Newsmakers. With me is Pennsylvania State Representative Thomas Murt. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, Jill. Great to be here.
We're talking about a piece of legislation that would amend the tax reform code as it relates to the inheritance tax. Now, right now, the inheritance tax doesn't apply to everyone. It doesn't apply when a spouse dies and the other spouse is inheriting property, is inheriting the assets of that estate. But talk to us a little bit about what your piece of legislation would do as to amend the inheritance tax.
That's a good question, Jill, and most of us are familiar with the fact that the inheritance tax does apply to property assets that are inherited through lineal heirs, collateral heirs, siblings, and so forth. And the inheritance tax can be as high as 15% depending on the category. And most people do not mind paying their fair share, whether it's a sales tax or an income tax, or in this case, the inheritance tax. But we believe that the inheritance tax in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has gotten a little unwieldy. And we believe that in many cases, the inheritance tax is overburdensome, where families or individuals are penalized because they were frugal and they saved and they worked hard and they set aside their money for their family or for a rainy day or for a new home or property or an operation or whatever the case may be. And we are proposing in this legislation that estates that are under $250,000 be exempt from property taxes. And essentially, we are reaching out to protect middle-class, working-class families who often are, as I mentioned, penalized because of the assets that are part of the estate.
And this would take into consideration all the assets in an estate as part of the inheritance tax. Let's talk a little bit about what this could mean for the Commonwealth, though, because the taxes that are part of the inheritance tax go into the general fund. So if you're talking about a loss of potential revenue going into the general fund, what could this mean for the Commonwealth?
Okay, and that's a very fair question. We are not completely proposing to eliminate the inheritance tax. The inheritance tax will still exist in the magnitude that it exists at the present time in the status quo. We believe that this approach is a more fair and a more balanced approach to the inheritance tax. The legislative proposal calls for estates under $250,000 to be exempt from property taxes. And I personally think that that's fair. However, we are practical enough to know that during the amendment process that there might be some amendments that will either increase or decrease that level based on what the what the Commonwealth gets back to us relative to what the impact might be on the general fund, the tax revenues that are generated.
Now, this is something that has been introduced in the past, but you are working to reintroduce this legislation. Why do you feel that this is an important piece of legislation that you want to bring back in this session?
We hear it from constituents all the time. And my colleague from Gettysburg, from Adams County, Representative Dan Mao, is the primary author of this bill, and I am assisting him in being a co-sponsor. And but this is an issue about which we hear all the time from constituents who are inheriting a property from their parents or from relatives or from a loved one or even from a friend, and they're finding out that they're inheriting a certain amount of income and they cannot collect it because of the taxes involved.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Jill.
We've been talking with Pennsylvania State Representative Thomas Murt. I'm Jill Horner.